Hi, welcome back to the Sandy Adams Show, where we talk about life, business, and everything in between. I really love doing these episodes. When I first started doing a podcast, I just got so excited about it, and it's actually one of the things that I most enjoy doing these days is recording these podcasts. And no shame in my game if you haven't already listened or have heard. I have another podcast I am co-hosting with former Harlem Globetrotters sensation Michael Wild Thing Wilson. He's a former University of Memphis basketball player, went on to play for 10 years with the Harlem Globetrotters. And we started a brand new podcast that we co host together. We started it back in, I want to say, midsummer. It's called the Fifth Quarter Podcast. You can find it on Apple, Spotify. We're on Amazon Music now and YouTube. But really easy. You can go to our website, which is 5thquarterpodcast.com to find all the links where you can listen and or watch. We have a new episode every Monday. And one of the things that it is about, obviously, is it's the fifth quarter. It's talking about professional athletes, competitive athletes who have transitioned into that retirement phase. They have finished their competitive careers and they have transitioned into some type of different role, whether that's still in the sport, coaching or mentoring or something like that, or it's going into another working field and what that may be. And not everybody ends up playing competitive pro sports. Especially what we found out is the women themselves. But one of the things that for some of you out there that may be thinking, well, that's kind of odd that she's doing a sports podcast. Actually, it's not. I love Memphis basketball, but the idea came really from talking about people transitioning, which is what today's podcast episode that I'm going to be sharing in just a few minutes is all about conquering career transitions. And so the Fifth Quarter Podcast is really about telling those stories about these athletes and they were unprepared or they were prepared or their career ended without their consent, whether that's injury or they got dropped by their pro team. Or in the case of a lot of women, there is no path for competitive sports after the college level. And so it's a conversation with all of these athletes. Not everyone is Steph Curry or LeBron James or Tom Brady. And it's the everyday person and the struggles and tribulations that they have in trying to navigate their fifth quarter of their life. And a lot of, many of the ones we've already talked to, their fifth quarter, their retirement age started in their 20s. Some of them, if they didn't play after college, it ended, their fifth quarter started when they were 21, 22 years old. And some of them retired at 33. My co-host, that's when he retired from competitive sports. So if you have a chance, go give it a listen. I will tell you that it's really entertaining. It's heartfelt. There's some really great conversations in there. If you have kids that are in sports, I think it's a fantastic way for them to get a lot of information about what not to do, what to think about, what to take into consideration. It's just, we've had so much fun with it, and it really fits into what I do as a brand and career strategist. And I just really have a great time with it. So give it a listen, and we would love a 5-star review. No shame in my game, as I always say. So back to today's topic, and that's conquering career transitions. And that, as I said, is the case for so many people. It doesn't matter, what industry you are in. I have come across hundreds and thousands of people that have wanted to transition and they weren't really sure. They wanted to pivot and they weren't really sure exactly what to do. They felt like if their diploma, if their college degree was not in that specific industry or not that specific job, then they really had no idea how to go about getting that experience in order to get hired. And what many people fail to realize is a lot of the skill sets that you have, many times they can transfer. We call those transferable skills. They can transfer into other industries, into other jobs. You don't necessarily have to have that specific experience. Now, granted, if you want to transition into heart surgery, obviously you need to be a surgeon. Okay, so that's a given. But, I'm going to talk about in this episode, I'm going to address three action steps that you guys out there can put into place and start thinking about. Preparation prepares us, obviously, but self confidence comes from that preparation. And so when you start thinking about, I'm going to give you those action steps that you can actually go and put into place and start using those, and that actually will build that self confidence and it will open your eyes. And I'm here to help you in that future endeavor of transitioning, whether it's pivoting into another industry or another job or anything such as that. So, the three steps that we're going to talk about are assessing your skills, interests, and values. That's step number one. Step number two, we'll be talking about setting clear career goals and creating a strategic plan. And then step number three is going to be talking about leveraging those transferable skills and networking for opportunities. And I'm going to share some of my experience that I have and also talk to you about many people that I've come across over the past 5, 6 years that have been in career transition of some kind. And some of the things that they did and how they found success when they didn't necessarily have that specific experience. So get your notebooks out. Obviously, this is recorded, so you can always refer back to it, but get your notebooks out. And I will try not to talk too fast, but you need to listen quickly. But you can always refer back to this episode. So let's really talk about that wanting to pivot, wanting to transition into a different aspect, whether it's the same career, the same industry, the same job type. It's normal. I've done it. I call it pivoting. I've pivoted several times in my life. And it's interesting when I look back at my career path and what I went to college to do when I got my undergrad and later when I got my master's. I ended up, even though I didn't go into the specific jobs that I went to school and got a degree to do and perform, I actually use what I've learned in those degrees in other things, in other roles. And so my degrees have been quite beneficial, just not as I originally intended. So my undergraduate degree was in international relations with a specialization and focus on the Middle East and Northern Africa. I know you guys are out there probably like freaking out now, like, what? Yes, I wanted to be an ambassador to a Middle Eastern country. I'd been fascinated by the Middle East and Egyptian history specifically since I was old enough to even read and learned who Ramses the Great was. And it's something that I still enjoy today. But what I will tell you is so many of the things that I learned in my undergraduate degree, I have put into use in so many aspects of my professional career, even transferable skills, knowledge, how to communicate, how to work with people of all different backgrounds. That's really come in handy. And so, that's one of the things that I want you to start thinking about is how, I didn't have a plan. I didn't think about all these things. I just went on this haphazard career journey. And then I started my photography career officially back in 2010 with no education in it, no experience really, no idea what the heck I was doing, and really just, fumbled my way through it, learning, hustling, figuring things out until I got on the other side of it. And so I want to use my experience that I've learned, the things that I've learned, people that I've talked to and that I've taught over the past several years. I want to share that knowledge with you today. So let's talk about now, you know, it is it is a common challenge to feel uh inferior, to feel like you're not worthy of it, that you don't have value. One of the things that I learned when I lived and worked in Houston with JS 101, shout out to them. It's no longer in existence now, but it was a great nonprofit. Working with them, the one thing that I really learned was that it's people, when they lose their job for whatever reason, especially really when it's not even their fault. A lot of times, especially in the Houston market, oil and gas had ups and downs. And I would see people come into our classes, into our workshops, and they literally would feel like and tell us they had no value. They weren't employed, they had no value. That's what they equated. They equated being employed to having a value. And I'm sitting there listening to them, and I'll give you an example. One guy, he had, I want to say, masters in nuclear physics or something, way over my head. Okay. And he's telling me that he doesn't have any value. And I'm like, dude, you do have value. And so, that's the one thing that I realized is you cannot equate, although it is actually common, it is quite common. Everybody does it, but you cannot equate your value to a job title or a paycheck. Okay, you can't. And it is perfectly normal to have these emotions when you're in some type of career transition. And for me, I experience the same thing. When the thing about me is when I graduated from college and I had this degree and I realized I didn't want to go to the Middle East. I didn't want to go into that type of work. I didn't want to leave Memphis. I felt like a failure. I did. I felt like I'd wasted my life. I'd wasted this degree, and what was I going to do now? What was I gonna do? I didn't have I see these people that go to school and they're like, "I wanna be a doctor, I wanna be a heart surgeon," and they go to school and they go pre-med and they go to medical school and they do their residencies and they become these heart doctors or whatever, and that's just an example, a lawyer, whatever. And they have this clear path of what they wanted to do, and I just felt like I did not have a clear path of what I wanted to do. I had a clear interest. Even my teaching, when I started my master's, I really wanted to teach in a museum setting. I wanted to go into archaeology. Memphis didn't have that program yet. That's what I wanted to go into. So I started my master's in anthropology. They didn't have an archaeology program. I started it in anthropology, and they were going to put piece together a master's program for me. And I went on my first dig in a cornfield in like November down in Mississippi. High winds, it's like 40 degrees outside. And I realized that's not for me. Okay. So I was like, what am I going to do now? Again, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I knew that I wanted to teach, and my mom was like, why don't you just get a teaching degree? And I was like, okay, I'll be a high school history teacher. Nobody told me you needed to coach a sport to teach high school history. It's a whole nother story. That could be a whole nother podcast. Okay. So I spent 5 years going to school, getting my master's degree to teach high school history and government. I did my student teaching, half of it overseas in England and Germany, in order to have that edge to get a job. And then I went to get a job, and they told me, too bad you don't coach a sport. We don't have any open positions for you. Now, what do I do? Now, you're probably thinking, how does this have anything to do with career transitions? Because people's paths are not always straightforward. Okay. And I want to use all of my trials and tribulations that I've gone through in my professional career to show you that I took what I had and I pivoted and I figured out what I was lacking and tried to get that. But I always am using skills that I've already had. Okay. So as we talk about this fear, this challenge of career transitions, I do want you to understand it's a normal part of everyone's professional journey. One of my best friends right now, she got a degree in biology. She got her master's in forensic science. She worked with the LAPD as a criminalist. She became a real estate salesperson, a realtor. And then she decided she wanted to go back and get her doctorate in forensic psychology. She's doing that. And now she wants to go back to being a realtor. Okay. And, I guess that's why we're friends, because we have the most wildly crazy career paths ever. But in some weird way, we make them all make sense, okay? So, there is something to that. So let's go into action step number 1, okay, which is assessing your skills, your interests, and your values, okay? So it's really important, it's especially important that you sit down and you really think about self-assessment, okay? You think about everything that you have. Get your resume out, okay? And I always tell everybody, this is a little side note, free tip for today. Always keep a master resume. And what does that mean? We can't remember everything. I have one master document, and as things happen, I add it to the document. That document is never going to be sent out to anyone. It is a master file so that I have a entire listing of everything that I've done, whether it's awards or publications or jobs or skills that I've learned or certifications, whatever it is, I add it to that master document. So it's always there. And then I can just copy and paste, okay? Because we forget those things. And if we have them in different places, we will never remember them, okay? So we want to break down this assessment process. We want to identify, you want to identify the skills that you've gained in both your current and your past roles. So get that resume out, go and look at every single job that you've done, even the ones that are not on your resume, because we all know at some point we've done a job that we just don't feel is of value and didn't put it on the resume. Okay. So you want to look at every one of those skills that you've done in your past roles. I want you to think about, was public speaking involved? Okay. Don't just look at, oh, what reports did I run? No, you want to talk about, did I do research? Was I a researcher? Was I a public speaker of some kind? Did I deal with customers, customer relations? Did I write a lot? Did I have to send out a lot of memos? Those kind of things. Did I have to do negotiations? Did I have others report to me? Did I have to manage people, management skills? I want you to go through and really think about every single role that you have done and write down all those things that you have done in those roles. Okay. Now, the second part of step number 1 is I want you to reflect on your personal interests and your passions. Yes. Because, if I look at my stuff, a lot of times my passions have led me into helping me pivot into something. Okay. Look at your personal interests and your passions, because I think people short circuit themselves, short side themselves. They don't give themselves enough slack or value or whatever. Let's just forget this section. But people often, because they're not getting paid for something, again, they think it has no value. Well, I did this for my church. I helped them with, let's just as an example, say somebody was like, I helped my church with their media on Sundays, but I don't get paid for that. So that doesn't count. Yes, it does. If you did the job, how much you were paid for that is irrelevant. If you did the job and you did it well and you learned, that's experience. So think about your personal interests and your passions. Okay. The third part of step number one is defining those core values that really guide your career decisions. You know, what is it that you really want to do? I love helping people. I do. I love helping people. Whether it is teaching somebody something or mentoring somebody something or working with the public. I could never be a waitress, but I love helping people. I really do. And so that's also been a value, a core value of mine that I really thought about. Is the nonprofit aspect, the wanting to give back to your community, those kind of things. So really think about those. Now, there are all kinds of things you can go and you can Google self assessment tests. And there's actually a great book called What Color is My Parachute? I used to use this book in part of my workshops. And there's a thing called the flower exercise that is actually really, really useful. And so I would highly recommend, especially if you don't know exactly what it is you want to do, you just want to do something else. It's a great book, and every year they put out a new version. So it's called What Color is My Parachute? And there is a companion workbook that goes with that. You can get them on Amazon. It's really great. And they also have different versions. So you can get one for college students, and I believe there is also one for high school students. So it's the same similar structure, but it's just designed differently based on whether you're a college student or high school student or an adult, those kind of things. But it's really a great book and a great workbook to really dive into those things. Now, let's talk about now. So let's do a refresher. So action step number 1 is assess those skills, your interests, and your values. Okay. So that's really creating your core of what you have to offer and what you want out of your next job or life. Okay, so now let's get into action step number 2, which is setting clear career goals and creating that strategic plan. It's really important, and I cannot say this enough. I cannot emphasize this enough, that it's so important that you think about what your goals are in your career transition. Okay. You have to have some plan. You can't just get in the car and say, I'm just going to start driving and not know where you're going to drive to, right? Okay, so you can't just start looking for jobs and not know what kind of job you want, not know what industry, not know all of these things. And that was one of the things that I learned in the 5 years that I taught with JS 101 in Houston, was that you have to know this first. You have to have a career goal first. So, right this moment, if you are not sure what it is that you want to do, go buy that book, What Color is My Parachute? I cannot stress that enough. That will really help you. So, you really want to sit down and define what are your career goals, okay? And you want to create some type of plan to achieve those goals. Now, for me, if I go back and look at when in 2017, I'd gone through a divorce, my mother had died. I had a master's degree in education, high school history and government. We talked about it. I'd never had a paid teaching position. Couldn't get a job when I was in Memphis. I was in Houston. I thought, oh my God, I've got like it's the biggest school district in the state is in Houston, Texas. Surely I can get a job and I don't have to coach, right? So I go and apply all of um, those computer programs. You have to put your resume in. And my background did not fit into their square pegs because I didn't have paid teaching experience. So I was never going to get through that computer system. And this is when I should have put a plan into action. If I'd thought about it, if I'd had um, the forethought then and the knowledge then that I knew several people that were on the committees that had to do with the school district, and I could have secured an interview that way. But I didn't think about that. I just thought I have to go through this computer system. So when I could not get a job, what was I going to do then? I decided at that time to my photography business. I had not put a whole lot of effort into it while everything was happening with my mom and my marriage. So I decided, well, I'm just going to really dive in and hustle in this. But I also put a plan into place that I was never going to be put in a position again where I did not have paid teaching experience. So, how do I get paid teaching experience if no one will hire me because I cannot get through that computer system? So I started looking, and I mentioned at the beginning of the segment, at the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned about opportunities. 'Cause that's gonna be the last one that we talk about. The last actionable step is gonna be about networking and looking for opportunities, okay? But I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that you really have to keep your eyes open for opportunities and keep an open mind. Don't just shut down those opportunities because they don't fit your perfect little mold in your head, okay? I kept my eyes open, and I was approached by a friend whose other friend worked at a small college outside of Houston, and they were looking for a person to teach senior citizens how to write their autobiographies. Or originally, they wanted somebody to teach social media, which is what I was doing at the time. And so I went in for the interview, and it was mine to lose. So I was referred by a friend of a friend, okay? It was my interview it was my job to lose, and I went in there and I had transferable skills. I had the knowledge and the background to do that. And so I was hired, and my title was adjunct professor. So I looked for that opportunity. Did I really want to teach social media? Not really, but I was going to be an adjunct professor. And so that would give me the experience at a college level to if I wanted to teach college. Okay. So I took that opportunity, and the social media class actually did not work out, but another professor left, and she was teaching the senior citizen class about writing your autobiography. And so they moved me into that role. And I got to tell you guys, it was awesome. I learned so much from those people, so very much. I really, really enjoyed it. And it was about keeping those opportunities, keeping your eyes open for opportunities because you never know what something can turn into. Okay. If I had just said, no, I don't want to teach social media, or I don't want to teach at this college, or whatever, that, negative aspect would have been, I wouldn't have ended up doing something that I really enjoyed and put me on the path, really to a lot of things that I've done since then. Okay, so think about, that strategic plan. I thought about how am I going to get more paid teaching experience? Even when I started my photography business, I really thought about how am I going to get photography experience? How am I going to get photo shoots? What am I going to do? How am I going to market myself? How am I going to learn how to do that? All those things. But you want to really sit down and think about the goal settings, your specific career goals. Okay. So if you want to, I'll give you an example. There was a lady that I worked with. She was one of my students. She had been unemployed for, I think, about 7 to 9 years. I can't remember. 7 to 9 years. She had been raising her kids. She was a chemical engineer in Houston, and she was wanting to get back into the job market. And so she was highly motivated, highly intelligent, had had a great career prior to her children. And she was having a really, really hard time because the oil and gas industry was on a downturn at that time. But what was going up was the space industry. Now, Think about that. She's a chemical engineer. And, we would sit there and think, how could she possibly get a job in the space industry if she's a chemical engineer? Because she's an engineer. A lot of the skill sets that engineers have, it's the thought process. So she made a plan. She did an assessment of what her transferable skills were, figured out which ones she needed to really put into place, started that networking component. I know I'm getting ahead for action step 3, but they kind of all go together. And she, within, I think, 2 months, got a job in the space industry, okay? And had not had any experience in the space industry prior to that, and had been unemployed for all those years raising a family. So it can be done, but you have to set clear goals of what that is. You have to set clear goals such as, making sure you have a great LinkedIn profile, making sure that your LinkedIn profile talks about your achievements, not about your duties for your jobs. What did you achieve? And that'll be another podcast where I talk about really about those achievements and how to correctly communicate those and on your LinkedIn profile. But for right now, you really have to think about, what is your goals when it comes to your career and what is that path that you're going to take. And it really has to start with, you know, where is it you want to go and what do you see being that first transitional position to get you where you want to go. For me, when I look back at it, it was I need to get paid teaching experience. And I'd already decided at the time in 2017 that I did not want to teach in high school. I did substitute teaching and realized I had come a long way and I really did not want to teach in high school. I wanted to teach in college, and because my degree was high school related, I was having a lot of issues with that. So, me looking for those opportunities and grabbing that small college teaching position fulfilled my pivot into that, because now I had something I could put on my resume. Okay. So, right now I'm coaching a lady who she has financial analysis background. She's highly creative and she creates a lot of these great visuals. Um, she wants a job that will combine the two. She wants to use visuals to tell and communicate the financial position of a company. And so what I have told her right now is look for nonprofits that need to have annual reports, okay? And create a couple of samples that show financial analysis, show a company's financial position to their shareholders, okay? Create those samples and visually the things that you want to put in there. And then go to these nonprofits and say, here are my samples. I would love to volunteer my services for you so that I can get experience. You don't even have to say so you can get experience. Just say, I want to volunteer my services. Sometimes we tell way too much. We don't need to share all that. You have a service that you can do. They are in need of a service, hopefully without a cost involved. So it's a win-win situation. Okay. Now, that is a career strategy plan for her. That's how she's going to get more experience. And also, it's also to find out if that's what she wants to do. If that's something she wants to do and she can start a consulting company in that way. Okay, so now let's go into action step number 3, which I've already kind of talked about because these kind of go hand in hand, but it's leveraging those transferable skills and network for opportunities. Opportunities. I cannot say that enough. Look for opportunities and don't just, dismiss one because it doesn't fit your round or square peg. Okay. So transferable skills are really important. The things that I started my career right out of college. Really, I started for an intermodal trucking company, and people are like, "You work for a trucking company?" I'm like, "Yeah, I worked with truck drivers. I handled their payroll, their owner-operators, I handled their payroll, but most importantly, I handled their maintenance and repair of the equipment they pulled." Okay? Now, I didn't actually, like, work on it, but I remember the first day I took over that, department, and I heard one of the ladies on the phone with the driver talking about a 1020 tire and 11R 22.5 tire and run flat and peeled cap, and I'm like, "Oh my god. I know history, you know? I know history. I know about the Middle East. I don't know about tires, okay, except they go on your vehicle." And 5 years later, I could handle any repair over the phone. Actually, I could handle repair over the phone more than I could in person, because visually I could visualize the what was wrong with the equipment. So anyway, think about, you really want to think about those transferable skills. Now, what did I learn at the trucking company? I learned how to communicate to anyone. Those drivers, we had over 260, give or take some. They were from all walks of life. Some of them were from other countries. Some of them, English was not their first language. They had all different kinds of educational levels, from barely having a high school education to having college education. Okay. Some were really good at, because owner operators, they run their trucks as their business. Okay. They're not company employees. So some of them were really good at accounting. Some of them were horrible at accounting. Some of them did not understand deductions coming out of their check. And I had to learn how to communicate with every single one of those people. And at that time, they were all men. We didn't have, I think, close to when I left the position, I think we had one or two women, but for the most part, 260 plus men I had to talk to. Okay. And I had to learn how to talk to them and communicate with them in a way that did not talk down to them, in a way that helped them to understand what I was talking about in terms of their deductions or their paycheck or the maintenance and repair. How do I communicate with with men who don't all speak English as their first language? How do I easily help them figure out what they're supposed to do when they have something that happens on the road? I created charts, and they basically went down one row and found what their problem was and went over, and it gave them a number that it told them exactly what they needed to do. So I figured out how to disseminate the information in a clear and simple, concise way, a lot of it visual, okay? That was the other thing that I learned, was people's learning ability, you know? Um, I had to deal with, I think, 7 vice presidents, and I had to send them emails that went over drivers and situations and everything, and I really learned that I had to do a lot of bullet points. People skim. They skim data, and they don't want long paragraphs. And so I learned how to communicate with all different kinds of people in a way that helped them to understand quickly and concise information on what they were supposed to do or needed to do. So that was a transferable skill that I got from working in an industry that most people would think, well, what could she do with that? Okay. Most of the transferable, like a lot of the things that I do now, um, my 10 years at that company taught me so much. It helped me with I developed so many transferable skills that I can use in so many other things, okay? So, when you are looking at your past jobs, think about that. Let's talk about action step number 3, and that's leveraging those transferable skills and obviously networking for opportunities. I've taught, as I said, we've talked about opportunities before, but this is a really important section. So, as I said, transferable skills and learning about those relevance to your new career. So, let's get into discussing the power of networking during a career transition. Networking is so, so, so important. I cannot emphasize how important networking is. And I know that I hear this from so many people, and they're like, I hate to network. I don't want to ask people for jobs. Okay, first of all, that's not what networking is. Networking, simply put, is just talking to another person, no matter where they are, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. I remember when I first moved back to Tennessee and I was out for a walk in the neighborhood I was in, and this elderly couple stopped and they were chit-chatting with me. And that was the last thing I wanted to do, was walking my dog. I wanted to go in and eat dinner. And I was trying to be nice. And they mentioned where their daughter lived, because I said I'd moved from Houston, and they mentioned this suburb of Houston. And I said, oh my gosh, that's where I moved from. And so in the course of that conversation, for some reason, they thought I was unemployed. I'm not really sure why. And the next day, she came up, another friend of hers came up to one of my friend's husbands who worked at the school and said, oh my God, we found Sandy a job. And he's like, I didn't know she needed a job. So networking can literally happen at any time in any place. And it's really just talking to people. And the one thing that I look at networking as is just I take a keen interest into other people, into their stories, into how they got to where they are at the moment that they're talking to me. I find people's career paths fascinating. I really do. And the thing is, you can pretty much tell if someone doesn't want to talk to you. Okay. We can get that vibe. But you don't have to be, it's not like you're prying. If somebody mentions something, I will follow up and ask about that something, whatever that something is. I was sitting in a car repair mechanic shop in Houston, and I'd been there for a couple hours, and it was a small little room, and it was hot. And this lady came in and she was waiting for her car too. And she was sitting there, and I just made a comment about, because no one else is in there. It's just the two of us, and we're not speaking, that awkward silence. And the television was on, and I made a comment about whatever was on the television, and she laughed. And then she asked me, do you come here often? No, she's asking me if I come to the mechanic shop a lot. And she'd never been there before. And I said, yes, I've literally come here for, I think at the time it was like 15, 14 years. Okay. I'd been in Houston. I'd found the mechanic like my first week or two there. And I said, I come here all the time. And so we just kind of struck up a conversation. And she's like, well, I just moved in the area. And I'm like, well, where did you move from? I'm curious. Did you grow up here? Um, and she said no. And she had grown up in a place. And anyway, come to find out, she'd gone to school to be a radio DJ. I found that fascinating. Okay. And just talking to her. So, there's always opportunities to find out about people, and you never know what you may find out. Never disqualify talking to someone because you don't think that they are of value to you. Go into it with, I don't know what the value is. I want to learn more. And it's not about asking somebody for a job, because you're never going to get a job if you just go up to some stranger and say, hey, got any jobs? Like you're not going to get that. People want to hire people they know, like, and trust. And so you have to build up to those know, like, and trust factors. Okay. But you really want to start building and nurturing those professional connections in whatever situation it is. One of the first things, well, actually, before I moved back to Memphis, I had already been on Twitter, because Memphis is obviously a sports town, and I'd already been on Twitter interacting with a lot of people. I was, getting familiar with the people that I had known in college. I was reconnecting with them if they had not already been in my friends list. And then, one of the things, if you don't know me, I've volunteered with the Heart Association now for 23 years. And one of the first things I did when I knew I was moving back to Memphis was I found out who the director was for the Memphis area, and contacted her and said, hey, this is what I've been doing in Houston, and I would love to volunteer and do it in Memphis. And she, sight unseen, said, let's do it. And um, now 3 years in, I'm photographing. I'm the official photographer for the Women of Impact in Memphis. So that was my immediate way of, "Hey, I wanna get back into the community, and how is it that I do that?" So that was, big a networking, opportunity, and of course, basketball. If you're not from Memphis, you don't know, Memphis is a big basketball town, and so I really wanted to get back involved with the university, and I love Memphis basketball, and I found, a booster club that supports the men's team, and I joined it, and I stalked the officers until that's our little joke. I stalked them until they asked me to be on the board. Again, showing them this is my value. This is what I can give to you guys. And so joined them, and it was like the best decision I've made. And it's, I've met so many people, and that basketball connection, that basketball joining that booster club, that basketball connection put me in touch with Michael, my co-host from my other podcast. And, we met at a reception we had for one of his teammates who'd passed away. We retired his jersey back in February, and we got to meet in person. And he just reached out to me in I think May, and reached out to me through Instagram and said, "Hey, I have this idea. Do you have time for a phone call?" And I'm like, "Sure." So we scheduled a call, and he got on it. He's like, "What do you do exactly?" And so I'm telling him, and he's like, "Well, I have this idea." And I don't even know if the idea itself was a podcast, and we just like, "Hey, this," and by the end of the conversation, we're like, "We're gonna have a podcast, okay? This is what it's gonna be." And, those are opportunities. And then all of the amazing guests that we've had online, we've had on the show, and just networking, you cannot rule it out because it's not in your job industry. Like, you can't. You cannot rule those things out. You don't know who people know. You honestly don't. And so do not discount someone because they don't fit your stereotype. I've had people tell me, "I'm not going to connect with these people on LinkedIn because they're unemployed." Okay, well, all their friends are probably not unemployed. If they're a chemical engineer and they've got friends, they're probably not unemployed. Um, but you just can't disqualify. Or I've had people say, "Well, I'm only going to network with people that are lawyers." Okay, well, guess what? People that are not lawyers hire lawyers. Okay, so, that's not the way to look at it. So you definitely want to um, build those professional connections, networking with all different kinds. And, um, I do talk about in one of my blog posts that I will link in the show notes here. Wrote a great podcast on the 5 types of people you should have in your LinkedIn network. So that would be another helpful bit of advice there. Networking strategies, as I said, LinkedIn is such an undervalued platform. It really is. And every 3 or 4 weeks, I go through where I just reach out to people, and I have a little 3 or 4 sentences, because I'll send a connection request, but I always add a note. And I don't say something stupid like, "Oh, I want to join your network. I want to add you to my network." Well, of course, but why? So I always add a little 3 or 4 sentences. And really, mine is, "Hi, so and so," whatever their names are, like, "Hi, Kelly. I honestly would love to add more women in the Memphis area to my network. I specialize in brand and career strategy. I talk about women empowerment. And if they're in the Memphis area, then I definitely add in, I'm VP of the Memphis Rebounders. That's the booster club, because that's relevant here." Now, I sent out several today connection requests to people in the sports arena that were in other cities. And so I didn't add the thing about VP of Memphis Rebounders, because that's irrelevant. What I did add was, I'm a co-host of the Fifth Quarter podcast, and we talk about athletes transitioning into, a career after their competitive sports careers end. And so that was kind of relevant there. And for that, I just simply said, I'm looking to add more people in the education, sports, or media industries, is what I put on that. So, let people know why. Don't just I have just sent connection requests because I'm in a hurry and I just click it, or I already know them, or they've been referred to me or something. But for the most part, if I don't know the people, I always add a note, and I try to make it This is why I want to connect with you. This is the reason. And this is what I give them like, 2 or 3 things because you only have a limited amount of space. 2 or 3 things that kind of highlights who I am and what I do is really what it's about. And then, another thing about networking is that you can seek advice from people and mentorship. Okay. Um, you might be looking for a mentor. I've reached out to other people. Hey, especially when I was starting my photography career. Hey, can you give me some advice on this stuff? And now people reach out to me. Hey, this is what I want to get into. Do you have any advice for me? Sure, I can spare 15 minutes and give you that. Um, it's it and if that sounded kind of like really bad that I say, "Hey, I can spare 15 minutes," because, when you work for yourself, every moment you need to be making money of some kind. So I've learned that as much as I want to help people, I also have to help myself first. Because if I don't help myself first, I can't help anybody else. And so that's another thing to really keep in mind. But, mentorship is a great thing. Uncovering hidden job opportunities is another thing. When you're talking to people, they might mention things. So you've got to be listening. And that's why, it's really important that you don't set those preconceived notions in your head, okay? And so, it goes back to if I talk about that job, that teaching position I got at that college, College of the Mainland outside of Houston, it was because of networking. I had met this lady, Kelly, through the Heart Association. Okay, I met her, and she had actually asked me one day, and I told her, she's like, "What do you do? What do you actually do?" Okay. And so I had told her, and she remembered that. And we had done a lot of, we'd been in contact a lot because of the Heart Association. And so when her really good friend said, "Hey, do you know anybody that can teach social media?" Kelly said, "Yes, I do." And so that was because of networking. I was involved in something that I cared about, but it was also a networking opportunity, the Heart Association and volunteering. But I also made a point of if somebody asked what I did, I learned to be very clear about what I do. You have to educate people on what you do. Okay. You have to. Otherwise, they're going to not understand. And if people don't understand what you do, they can't refer you. They can't refer you. They can't recommend you to a job that because they don't know what you do exactly. So I think that especially with women, I think many times we're not clear or we gloss over what we actually do, and I think that's important. I actually interviewed a lady on another podcast. I have 3 podcasts. Another podcast, a Southern Girls View with Sandy Adams. I haven't started my next season yet. It's been a couple of years, and I'm reassessing, what I can do with that, but that's another podcast. But I interviewed a friend of mine. I was looking for people, and she said, "Hey, I have this a friend of mine. She used to live here. She lives in Florida now. Her name's Valerie McNeil, and she actually worked at NASA back in, I want to say, the 80s." And I was like, "Oh, really? I That's an interesting story. I'd love to talk to her." So in the conversation that we had, I scheduled the interview. We did it through Zoom. All my podcasts now are done through Zoom. I did the podcast episode, and she actually worked with the female astronauts. Okay. And then when, oh my gosh, I forgot the astronaut who, oh my god, I cannot remember his name. He went back into space at, I think, like 70 years old. He was one of the guys that I think walked on the moon. I'm really good in history, and right now my mind is blank. But she actually was the one that put him into his spacesuit, and tucked him into the when he got into the space shuttle. So she was the one that actually helped him into his spacesuit. And so her story was fascinating, okay? It was just fascinating. And um her story is one of those that she used her transferable skills and just looked for those opportunities. I'm going to place that one. I'm going to remember that one too. I'm going to pop that podcast link into the show notes because her story is also fascinating about how she transitioned through her career and didn't have a college degree. She actually went back later and got the college degree, but how she got the job at NASA and just everything that everything she accomplished at NASA is really inspiring. And so it's another way of taking what you've learned and just looking for those opportunities. So, see, things just come to my mind while I'm talking. Um, so now, you know, it doesn't matter. A lot of times people they get they get that roadblock about their age or I'm too set in my ways. It's too late. Honey, I just pivoted again, at the age of 49. Um, I really am sick. I just pivoted at the age of 49 a few years ago. And, I looked at, I watched my mom. My mom pivoted a couple of times in her life too. And a lot of people do, and I'll talk about my best friend who got her doctorate in, forensic psychology and then decided this year that she's gonna go back to real estate, and we're the same age, literally, we're 2 days apart in age. So, there's no such thing as it's too late or I just, there's no opportunity out there. There is opportunities out there. And I think that one of the first things that you need to do is be open to that. Okay. And really think about, what it is you want and go after it. And, I've shared these stories about people who have transitioned and pivoted in their careers and, you know, um, and even myself. And I think that these are inspiring stories and you can learn and take away a lot from, you know, how we've done it, how we transition without really knowing what the heck we were doing. Okay. So let's recap as we come to the end of this episode. Let's just recap what we've talked about. So, I recommended 3 action steps. And the very first one was to assess those skills, your interest, and your values. Really take inventory of what you have and what you want to do and your core values. And action step number 2 is to sit down and really set clear career goals and create that strategic plan, even if it's just a plan that only has, a little bit. It's kinda like, I'm gonna I'm gonna I'm trying to think about how to kind of, give you an analogy, but like you go that first mile. I'm just gonna go that first mile, and then I'm gonna reassess and see where I wanna go, and I think that that is a good thing. You can have, like, a 5-year plan, okay, or a 10-year plan, but life is not that cut and dry, okay? And it's good to have that 5, 10-year plan, but also have, like, that 1-year plan, okay? Or even that 6-month plan where, "Hey, I'm gonna reassess," okay? Because again, you will see opportunities out there the more your eyes are open to those. Okay. Action step number 3 is to leverage those transferable skills and network for opportunities. Okay. Network for opportunities. The more you network, the more you are open to talking to people, the more your eyes are open, looking for those opportunities of, hey, I can help you do that. Hey, I could do that job. Hey, those are the things that you should really be looking for, okay? And I really want to reiterate the importance of embracing career transitions with confidence. If you sit down and you assess everything and you think about things and you read up on it and you investigate some things, have some interviews, go interview people that are actually doing those jobs. And those are actually called informational interviews and they're powerful tools that you can use. You're the one asking the questions. And I think that that's a great thing to put in place to kind of help you figure things out and figure out, what it is you do. And, those are networking opportunities right there. And you can get a lot of insight from informational interviews. But Career transitions are important. And the more you research, now you're never going to be fully ready. So don't like, oh my gosh, I've got to do all of this and then I'll start, because you're just going to keep adding things. But the more that you think about, what your product is, which is yourself, and what the ingredients are, the transferable skills that you can use in something else, that other job, the more confidence you're going to have, and you really, the first step towards that career change is to, that's important. Don't wait for things to be perfect. If I had waited for myself to become the best photographer, or if I had waited till I had, like, you know, taken all these classes, I would never have actually done a photo shoot, because I would have been so focused on getting the knowledge. I learned more from going out and making mistakes and learning on the fly, so to speak, than I would have done, because I did take a few photography classes. And actually, for most of them, they taught me what not to do. If that, to be truthful, they taught me about not what not to do. But, really, there's so many advantages. You should not shy away from doing something that you really want to do. And, if you look at Michael Jordan, when he retired and went and tried baseball, he didn't succeed at baseball really, but he tried it. He didn't have to do that. He did not. And the muscles, that was something I wasn't aware of really, because when he spent all of those months as the baseball player and then decided to go back into the NBA, he was out of shape, because the muscles and the things he focused on as a baseball player are different than what you focus on as a basketball player. And I hadn't really thought about that, but it makes perfect sense. So, he tried something else. He pivoted into something else. And so, a lot of people do that. And it's not something that you should wait. Just start, figure out how you can get your feet wet, so to speak, and jump right in. Um, Guys, thank you so, so much for listening in today. And I hope that I have not rambled too much. I really wanted to get this podcast out because I think that it is an important topic, especially with the world the way it is these days. I don't think anyone stays in the same job for 30, 40 years like our parents or their parents did. I think that with the way technology is and the way the world is, I think that people are pivoting and changing and learning, and um, are being fascinated by things, and all these things are coming into play. And I think that, do not put a roadblock up and think that you cannot do something because you don't necessarily have that experience. For the most part, there is I believe there, where there is a will, there is a way of some kind. Okay. But as I said, let's go back over those 3 action steps again. Number 1, assess your skills, interests, and values. Number 2, set clear career goals and create a strategic plan. And number 3, leverage those transferable skills and network for opportunities. I want to thank you all for listening today. Thank you so very much. Remember that if you love this podcast, I'd love for you to give me a 5-star review on Apple. Go and follow me on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And I will have more episodes coming out quickly as I go forward in this last quarter of 2023. So, guys, have a great rest of the day. Thanks. Bye.
Well, folks, that's it for today. I just want to say thank you so much for listening in today and for the desire to reach beyond what you think is possible. I would love to connect with each of you on Instagram. So if you would screenshot this podcast and then post it in your stories, and be sure to tag official Sandy Adams so I can give you inspiration right back. And if you're feeling all kinds of inspired today, then go ahead and go on over to iTunes and leave me a 5-star review. There's just no shame in my game, I tell you. I would love to know what most motivated you out of today's conversation. And so until next time, have a fantastic rest of the day.